Hi guys, welcome back. It has been a 2-week hiatus now, I think, from long form videos. So for that, I apologize. We've had a busy couple of weeks. It was Reese's birthday and then I was sick, terribly sick with norovirus. It was awful. I was in bed. Anyway, we're back. Okay, so we're back today with a big topic and it's really around fat loss. But the reason I wanted to cover this is because I think a lot of the time, people think about fat loss as a one-step process, okay? So they think, all I need to do is go into a diet, I'll see fat loss, job done. And whilst that's technically true, in my experience, people get much better results when they look at this as more of a 4-step process. Now, crucially today, as you might be able to see from my whiteboard, we're looking at fat loss forever. How you lose fat and actually keep it off in the long run. Because most of the time, people are pretty good at the dieting bit. People have successfully lost weight, I'm sure, time and time again. But if you are then looking to lose weight for the 5th, 6th time, because at some point that weight came back, I believe truly a lot of those occasions is because it's just not looked at from start to finish in the way that I feel is most effective. Now, the dieting bit, as much as that is the thing that elicits the actual change that you're wanting to see, the fat loss itself, it's not the start of the process and it's also not the end. So I'm going to run through those 4 steps for you today so that hopefully you can take this with you as a bit of a blueprint to start your own forever fat loss journey. Okay, so step 1 is something that I call baselining inside coaching. And essentially it is pre-diet preparation. Now, this is the bit that most people are pretty eager to just skip right past because you've decided you want to make a change, which is great, but you're also pretty impatient. You just want to get going and starting to see those results as quickly as you possibly can. Now, I would urge you to do this part first. This is setting yourself up for success. That's how you want to look at it, laying the groundwork. So in baselining, we're going to do a couple of things. Firstly, we are going to track. We're going to track our nutrition and our body weight for 2 weeks at a minimum. Now, the reason that we want to do that is because we want to figure out what's happening for you right now. Sure, where are calories sitting? What's your intake looking like? But also what's happening with things like macros. Where's your protein falling, your carbs, your fiber, your general nutrition quality, ultra processed versus whole foods, all of those types of behaviors are something that we really want to capture during this baselining period. So you don't need to change anything fundamentally in that initial period of time. It's just about looking at what's actually happening. And most of the time, we're actually finding maintenance here. Most people are kind of maintaining their body weight right now, but want to be looking at fat loss, right? Either way, even if you're in a surplus or in a slight deficit, we will figure that out when we start tracking that data. But for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that you are maintaining your current weight based on current intake and behaviors. So we want to track that, capture that on a daily basis. What's happening to body weight? What is happening to nutrition? Tracking it as accurately as you can do, getting a little bit more clinical around exactly how you're capturing your food, because you're gonna need that when it comes time for a deficit. So once we've done that data gathering and we can see, okay, I'm roughly maintaining my body weight and my average intake is sitting somewhere around here, then we can get a little bit more specific about the things that need to change. That is where optimize comes in. So we can look back over the last couple of weeks and probably pick out some pretty key themes, okay? What do we want to be changing to make fat loss easier when it comes to things like nutrition and just general lifestyle? So we might notice that protein could use some work. So we might bump up protein a little bit. We might notice that things like movement, okay, at the minute I'm getting, say, 4,000 steps. Maybe I can work to increase that by 20%. Let's aim for 6,000 for the next couple of weeks. And also just lifestyle habits that you're noticing during that 2-week period. So things like all or nothing mindsets. You go out on a Saturday and then just think, fuck it, I'll think about it again on Monday. You spiral after those odd occasions where you have something more indulgent. Maybe you overeat of an evening, right? So there's always a reason why that is the case. You don't want to be ignoring these things and just hoping that they go away. These are things we want to be fixing inside this baselining period, which for most in total is around 2 to 4 weeks. First couple of weeks is this tracking piece. We are data gathering. The second 2 weeks is around optimizing to make sure we're heading into a deficit from a solid foundation. Now, there is a running theme throughout every single one of these phases, and that is training, okay? I would hope you're already training semi-regularly, okay? But we want to be thinking about doing this 3 to 4 times per week. That's generally the sweet spot in my experience. So we're starting that from day one. If you're not already resistance training, it is something that I strongly recommend that you do, particularly when we're thinking about the next step in the process. And then the final piece of baselining before we move into diet is doing some calculations, okay? So based on data gathering, bit of optimizing, I'm tracking the data the entire time, my protein's in a good place, I'm getting regular meals, I'm hitting my fiber content, I'm getting a decent level of steps, I'm getting some training in. At that point, we can then take some clean data as to what our deficit targets should be. And when it comes to a deficit target, it's going to look different for everyone. But I would usually suggest somewhere between 15 and 20% from maintenance is a really good place to start. Okay, now it's time to head into our dieting phase. Now, when we think about creating a deficit, we've kind of done our calculations based off of what was maintenance for us. It is the most accurate view of maintenance you could possibly ask for. A calorie calculator could never. Okay, this is actual data that you have taken from your body over time as a result of what you're actually doing in your current day-to-day life, okay? So deficit-wise, we will always be looking at decreasing your intake, okay? That is the fundamental piece that we need to be manipulating when we think about energy balance, okay? We may also think about increasing our output. So this is our energy out section. Now, we would find it difficult creating a deficit solely from just adding in more and more and more movement, okay? We need the intake to be the thing that is the main driver here. We may or may not make slight changes to output, depends on the person, but if you can spot gaps in your life where it is going to be realistic for you to make a slight increase on the movement you are doing, then it makes sense to look at doing that. Now, don't be adding on 3 hours of cardio when you currently do diddly squat cardio. We can come to using movement a little bit more as those helpful levers to pull on later down the line of your deficit when you need them. But something like taking a slight bump in your steps, again, is likely a good idea. If you're getting 10,000 here, aim for 12,000 here. Now, when it comes to our nutrition, which is fundamentally the most important thing when we're thinking about fat loss, okay, there are a few things that I will live and die by, okay? And I will actually think about this at maintenance too, which I'm going to come on to in a second. So we want protein, 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. I usually just aim for 2 grams because the maths is easy, okay? It's easy for me to remember that if I'm 60 kilos, I'm aiming for 120 grams of protein. But somewhere between that range seems to be, from the research we have so far, optimal for muscle growth. Now, we don't know that more is necessarily better. 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight tends to be where you get the biggest return on investment. So if you're someone who struggles to get protein into their diet, maybe you're a vegan or vegetarian, or maybe you just struggle with protein targets, aim for the lower end of that range. You're still going to get the lion's share of those benefits. We also want to be eating every 3 to 4 hours. So this is counterintuitive to what you may have learned about dieting previously. Maybe you've tried fasting, or maybe you're just thinking, well, I need to eat less, so why on earth would I make sure that I'm eating as regularly as possible? That doesn't make sense. It does make sense, because a starving, hungry person, someone who is feeling perpetually hungry throughout the day, who also lives a busy and stressful life, is not going to make good nutritional decisions, is not going to be able to feel regulated throughout this deficit. So again, the sweet spot in my experience is every 3 to 4 hours. There is no scientific reason as to why you must stay within that window. There's nothing to suggest it's superior for body composition purposes, but it's just human psychology that hungry people that have gone 6, 7, 8 hours between meals without eating, are less likely to go to the fridge and get their nice portioned snack that they've got prepared as part of their deficit. We also want repetition. Now, again, there is no scientific reason as to why you need to do this. This is just a logistical point, okay? If you live a busy, stressful life, you do not want to be thinking about 28 different meals that you're going to eat throughout the course of the next 7 days if you're eating 4 times a day, okay? Do not reinvent that wheel. Try wherever possible to keep at least a couple of your meals on a daily basis similar. For me, breakfast and snack in the afternoon or mini meal in the afternoon, they are always one of 2 things during the working week. I'm not in a deficit right now, but it's just for ease. I enjoy those things. It takes me 5 minutes to throw them both together. They work for me. The more you can repeat, the easier this process is going to be. Cook once, eat at least twice. As I mentioned on the training piece, this is going to remain constant throughout. 3 to 4 training sessions per week. And it is a bit of a fallacy that you're going to lose strength or lose muscle in a deficit. If your protein is high and your deficit is appropriate, you should and absolutely can continue to build strength in a deficit, okay? It's gonna be harder to build muscle mass, obviously, than if you were eating at maintenance, but it's not impossible. It's just a little harder to come by. So we do wanna keep the intention on our training at the forefront of our mind. And then we come on to movement, okay? So these are kind of at the bottom because we may or may not need to use these. But I would much prefer, as you get down the line and you start to see things are maybe slowing down, you're not seeing as kind of frequent drops on those scales, and things are feeling a little bit harder, and you're also noticing a bit of extra hunger, etc. Rather than taking calories away, what you might want to do is think about just increasing that energy out a little bit more. So maybe another 20% increase on steps. Maybe you introduce another 15 minutes of cardio, another 30 minutes of cardio. Again, what you exactly do, I physically cannot say. It depends on the person, but it's worth considering later down the track when you need them. Okay, so let's say our deficit is done. We've lost the weight. Amazing. We've seen the weight loss we're wanting to see, and we're now thinking about getting back to maintenance, okay? How do we maintain? How do we protect that result? This is the bit that most people mess up, honestly. So when we think about protecting that result, which is exactly what we're doing, there are lots of schools of thought as to how you get back to a place where you're at an appropriate calorie level for your new body composition. So essentially reverse dieting, or just getting to maintenance, okay? Now, in my experience, when working with lots and lots of women, the best way to approach this, in most cases, okay, there are some edge cases where I think I take a different approach. In most cases, we just get to an estimated maintenance, okay, based on their new body weight, right? So I would prefer this approach here over taking very small incremental increases week to week to week. In, again, most cases with most people, you just don't need to be doing that, okay? What you're likely doing is prolonging the deficit for longer than is needed. Now, in cases of people that have signs of low energy availability, okay, severe metabolic downregulation, then sure, we might take a more step-by-step approach. But if the diet has been relatively straightforward, it's been relatively short, you've lost maybe 5-6 kilos, then just getting to estimated maintenance is likely your best play. Now, you can just use a calorie calculator for this. It's not the worst thing that you could use to kind of estimate where that is for you. Obviously, if you're working with a coach, you'll get a much more accurate result there, but estimated maintenance is the play. Now, when intake comes up, which it will, okay, you're increasing your food, what will happen is your body weight will also increase. Now, you might be thinking, well, we're just talking about protecting the result. Why the fuck would I want to be seeing my body weight increase? Hold your horses, okay? It will come up from this lowest point in your deficit. It just will. You have more food in your body. You're likely going to be training a bit harder. There's more carbs in your system, more glycogen in your muscle stores. All of that weighs something. So you will see the scales come up initially, okay? You see this little increase here. That is inevitable. But what we will then see is that body weight stabilizes, okay? A nice horizontal wiggly line. That will happen. And any of that minor downregulation that we will always see in any deficit when it comes to your metabolism will naturally start to come up roughly in line with the increase that you've made, okay? More than likely. Like I say, in some cases where downregulation has been a little bit more chronic, then we may take a more step-by-step approach. But generally, getting yourself to a conservative maintenance is the right physical and psychological play, okay? We then look at nutrition, and honestly, again, this is another area where I think people just get this wrong. You are doing the same thing when it comes to your structures, okay? It is the same as what you were doing in a deficit. You just have more food. At this point, in this protect window, right? Everything is the same. Intake is just slightly higher overall. So we still want 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein. We still want eating every 3 to 4 hours. We still want to be keeping meals really simple, really repeatable, okay? We want to take the admin out of this. Make it as easy as possible for yourself to stick to your new calorie target. We also want training to remain the same, 3 to 4 times per week. But the thing that you will see, and this may not even be that intentional, but your intensity will increase. With more food available, you will have more energy, period. That will allow you to push in your sessions, okay? And actually, this is something that I really want you to prioritize at this point, because you will likely notice that difference in energy levels generally when getting yourself back to maintenance. Movement piece, if you've increased steps and cardio as a lever for fat loss, you can take that right back to baseline, wherever it was in that optimized stage of baselining, okay? If you know you were getting 3,000 steps when you first started capturing things and thought, okay, for health reasons, I should probably think about increasing that slightly, then take it back there, okay? Not all the way back to the start. We want to start from the place where we really started considering those healthy habits. Now, similarly to baselining, back here, where we kind of spent 2 weeks or so just getting the lay of the land, tweaking things, optimizing things, I will usually suggest this type of approach where we are still tracking nutrition, we are still kind of pretty similar when it comes to nutritional behaviors and structures as we were in a deficit, just with a little more allowance. I would say this is usually around 2 weeks, okay? As I say, similar to baselining, usually. Might be slightly longer, might be slightly less, okay? After you have that stable body weight, training performance improving, an estimated maintenance, and you can kind of see that things are remaining where they should be with that new intake. You're still nailing your nutritional structures just with your higher budget to play with. Then we can really think about the fourth phase, which is living in the result that you have created, and crucially, continuing to see improvements here. So when we think about this live section, we've kind of so far been pretty structured, pretty regimented. Okay, so this is where little tweaks are made where they're needed, and we start to introduce a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more intuition. Now, adjustments. This may or may not be required, but that kind of second half of that 2 weeks that we were spending roughly protecting the result, we kind of got another couple of weeks of making those tweaks wherever we need to. So perhaps we notice that as calories have increased, we are training harder and therefore we're getting a little bit hungry in the middle of that session. Okay, great. So let's introduce a pre-workout snack to make sure those energy levels remain stable. Maybe you notice that, okay, body weight's remaining really stable at this new calorie range, but actually I am still pretty hungrier than I think I should be at maintenance. I'm getting quite snacky an hour or so after lunch, even though my lunch is pretty satisfying, or it certainly was a couple of weeks ago when I first started, but that hunger's starting to increase. That is a sign, okay? We might increase intake here. We might take a calorie bump here. We can absolutely do that at this point when we know that kind of metabolic health, general biofeedback is strong, and we've got that from this protect phase. We can lean in then to those extra signals that we get along the way. So we might take a slight calorie bump, track against that again in this kind of final couple of weeks to just make sure that we are fueling enough so that we feel satisfied throughout the day. We sit down to our next meal and we're ready for it, but we're not perpetually hungry. Training performance is good, sleep is good, recovery is good, libido is good, menstrual cycle is good. All of those big green ticks that we have got to a point where we are optimally fueling. We then move in to flexibility versus structure. Now, this is the bit, again, I know a lot of people struggle with this. And it's a very common question that I will get, how I navigate, more social weekends or holidays or weddings or whatever it might be. And I always bring it back to these two things. I can have flexibility, but I can't have endless amounts of flexibility without any structure. Okay, the structure bit is the thing that I want you always bringing yourself back to. The structures I speak of are exactly what we have been doing the entire time. Regular meals, protein and fiber forwards, a decent level of steps each day, just literally for health reasons, getting your training in regularly. All of those things are your structures. How many meals you eat a day, what times you're eating them. Those are the structures you bring yourself back to. So as long as we have genuinely, I know 80-20 gets thrown around a lot, but it's actually not bad. I don't know why I can't write in this angle. Let me turn myself around. I'm left-handed, by the way, which makes everything more difficult. So 80-20. It's cliche, but it's true, okay? Now, with this type of split, obviously it's impossible for you to put an exact percentage against the meals that you are giving that structure to and the meals that you're giving flexibility to. And the reality also is this will shift and change over the course of a year. You might have 6 weeks coming up where you've got 5 different social occasions. You've got a wedding, you've got a holiday, you've got a hen do. It is non-stop. Well, at that point, obviously, it's not going to be 80-20, is it? But I'm talking about looking at your life across a 365-day period, 80-20, zoomed out, not just the next 6 weeks as we're heading into the height of summer, right? This is a really good framework. So you go out at the weekend, you eat a pizza and a couple of pints, great. What are you doing the next day? The next morning? Are you ordering a Deliveroo? Or are you getting yourself out for a nice walk in the fresh air and having a high protein, high fiber breakfast? That is what we're talking about. If you have that structure, roughly 80% of the time, the 20%, honestly, you don't need to worry about. You don't. Because when you have that structure and you are in tune with your body and what it needs, when it is hungry, when it is full, how often you need to be eating, what the majority of your food choices look like. When that is sound, there is no on or off the wagon. There are slightly less nutritionally dense choices and slightly more nutritionally dense choices. That is it. And then lastly, monitoring. So how do we know we're maintaining that physique? And not just maintaining, but how do we know that we're improving? What does that look like? Well, let me tell you, in a diet, it's pretty fucking easy. You look at the scales, don't you? You go, okay, cool. I'm a pound down from last week. Big thumbs up. You don't get that here. There is no instant gratification whatsoever, okay? So instead, we need to change the things that we're looking for in terms of progress. What does progress look like? Firstly, pictures. Pictures are probably the most powerful visual of what's happening over time. Now, when we're thinking about living at this new physique that you've created, you're probably going to want to be looking at less frequent measurements than you were taking in the dieting phase, maybe once a month. Because when we think about muscle growth, which is the main element of your composition that you're going to be changing here and be really well posed to change, honestly, it takes time. It doesn't happen week to week. So you're taking your flexed progress photos, you're looking for little tiny changes over time in those areas you're wanting to see those changes in. You're also obviously going to be looking at your lifts. Are they improving? They should be. Why wouldn't they be? At this point, fueling the way that we are with the structures that we have, these should be increasing. Not every week without fail, but over time, without question. And then you kind of want to decide, lastly, whether you're going to be tracking, whether you want to continue tracking your nutrition, or whether you want to start thinking about being a little more intuitive when it comes to tracking. This is honestly personal choice at this stage. Okay, you're kind of maybe 6 weeks out the other end of your deficit. At this point, if you want to continue tracking, if it isn't taking up too much mental bandwidth or frankly time, and it's something that fits into your life and you don't mind doing it, then there's nothing wrong with continuing to track for a while to just be sure. Do you want to track forever? No, you don't. You might also at this point decide, okay, yeah, I'm ready to just move away from this a little bit, give myself a little bit more grace to make the right kind of decisions. Now, again, we bring ourselves back to these structures. If you are doing all of the things that I've rattled off, you don't necessarily need to be tracking it to be sure of that, because repetition is there. 3 to 4 hour meal windows are there. Your protein and fiber forwards approach, PCC, protein, carbs, color, those sorts of things that we talk about inside coaching all of the time, they are bedded in. So as long as you're doing that, you don't need an app to tell you that the sky's blue when you can see that for yourself. So you can kind of decide on which route you'd like to take. If you do want to think about moving into more of an intuitive approach, something that I recommend usually inside coaching is just choosing a couple of days of the week, ideally not at the weekend because they tend to be a little less structured generally, but kind of a working day, a normal day in your life. Pick a couple of those, don't track it, write it down somewhere, then track it retrospectively at the end of the day. Type it all in, see where it comes out. And once you start gathering that evidence that what you're eating happens to align perfectly with everything that you've been doing in this section, the reliance on tracking becomes much, much less. And you can gradually move away from that as you see fit. I've just realized that the sun is really ruining my aesthetic. I'm sorry about that. I'm in my kitchen, okay? I'm not a professional content creator. I am a coach. I do my best. But I apologize if you can't really see at this point. It feels like we're finishing up at exactly the right time. So look, I hope that was helpful. As always, you can pop your questions in the comments. You can join the waitlist for one-to-one coaching. I'll leave the link in the description. I am not going to be opening the doors again until at least September at this point. But anyone that adds their name, I'll reach out, get to know you a little bit more, see what your goals are, see if we're the right fit, and we can take it from there. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Love you.